I would like to start with a little provocation. Don't you have nothing more interesting to do? Uh, well, would like to start talking about three things that you probably know better than me, for sure: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, to be honest, sex are too exhausting, drugs are too expensive, unfortunately, and rock and roll are too extinct. The first thing I would like to talk to you today is time. And time has this amazing characteristic. Time doesn't stop. The expression, everything in life has its time, it's not true. Even life stops one day, but life and time doesn't. So today, everything is very, very fast, and nobody wants to wait for nothing and for nobody and for anything. We want immediate answers. We want it right now. And in my opinion, it's because of three major things. The first thing is intermittence. When I was a kid, and probably when your teachers were kids, many things were for life. The marriage were for life, the jobs are for life, friendships are for life. And nowadays, the forever thing, it's gone. We don't have it anymore. The second thing, it's disposable. We live in a era of using and discard, and every time faster and faster and faster. And the third thing, it's urgency. Of course, we live in an era of we want everything urgent. We want to learn Spanish in 2 weeks. We want to learn how to surf in 3 classes. We want to A+ in 2 months or less. So there are brands that already understand these trends and make it their communication concept. For example, Vodafone, that probably you all know, the last communication concept before this one was now, make the most of now. You know how this concept was launched? I'm going to show you. With this movie called Ephemera, I don't know if it runs all around Europe, but it runs in Portugal. And the Ephemera movie, it's about a little insect that has a life expectancy of just 1 day. But do you think this little Mayflower feels miserable about that? No way.
The common mayfly has a life expectancy of just 1 day. But is he miserable about it? Not one bit. He fills his day with the things he loves. He soars, he swoops, he savours every moment. Maybe there's a lesson in this for us longer living creatures. Just think, if we embrace life like the mayfly, what a life that would be. Vodafone, make the most of now.
Carpe diem. So the thing is, the world has changed, and that happens because today people have the power. People feel it, know it, and they want to use it. When I start work in advertising early in the 90s, this is my reality. Even if I had to do a campaign for an airline company or for a chocolate bar or whatever, this is my reality. I have to make an idea that works on television, newspaper, direct marketing, radio, outdoors. This is my reality those days, well, our reality those days. And now we have a more complex world. We have now blogs and augmented reality, buzz marketing, digital radio, email marketing, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Flickr, MSN, Google, and blah, 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 mobile. So this complexity makes very difficult to reach our target. So even if we have these at those times, probably now we are in this stage, which is very, very much complex, and it is very, very difficult to reach people. But the most interesting thing about this is we have thousands of tools to change one little thing called perception. And talking about perception, how many of you use Google every day? Probably most of you. So we are very familiar with the Google logo, right? So which one is the right Google logo? Can you tell me? Can you look a little to some of those? Okay, difficult, right? We thought we saw this every day. What about Yahoo? They all look similar, they are all different. We look at these logos lots of times a day, and we think we know it very well, but we don't because of perception. Another one, Amazon or YouTube or Flickr or eBay. We think we know the logo, we think we know the brand very well, but we are being trained by our perceptions. So another example, you all know the trick of this logo, right? For those of you who don't know the trick of this logo, there's an arrow between the E and the X. You see it? The arrow has been there forever, has been always there, and from the moment I pointed out, you will see it very clearly. It seems more whiter than rest. That's, of course, perception. Okay, so we know our target smells advertising miles away. We know that he doesn't is not waiting that advertising surprise him. And why? Because there are things much more interesting in life than advertising. And that happens because of this. Unfortunately, advertising isn't competing with the real world. Every minute, every second, life and the world present us with surprising, amazing, unbelievable things. Like this, for example, this lady was in Havana a few years ago when I went there, walking around the streets like this. Can you imagine? So reality, the world makes advertising seems very, very uninteresting. And as always, there are brands that understand that trend. And the next example I'm going to show you doesn't run on television. It was exclusively viral. It had millions of views, and it won a Grand Prix in Cannes a few years ago. See if you know it.
Okay, also, grade 5 please, cameras forward. And we record this now. It's slated for the camera.
Of course, our perception of beauty it's wrong because we know those skins aren't like that. We know Nowadays, we know that everything is photoshopped and everything is treated, the image and everything. So we don't believe in advertising anymore. So I hope you are all seated because I'm gonna reveal here and now the secret of the century. Are you ready? Okay. That's true. People don't have time for advertising. Why? Because everyone, every individual is too busy thinking of himself. It's too concerned in what has to do, what he wants to do to waste time with advertising. Of course, the most worrying is we are all seeking fun and good experiences, choosing the best contents for our lives. And we have more things to do than time to deliver it. Of course. So the selection criteria in what to do, into deciding what to do, are increasingly high. And people are not sitting in a corner in a sofa waiting to advertising to tell him to decide what to do. Well, of course, there are some exceptions. This lady, Paris Hilton, is constantly searching for things where to spend his money or his father's money. But most of us are, of course, frantically searching for things where to use our time. So time has become our most precious thing. And people start to appreciate every moment. We start to value every moment. We know this. This precise moment will not repeat again. So the decision to make something, it's always cruel because when you decide to do something, you are deciding not to do another lots of things. If I'm here talking to you, I'm not in the meeting that I supposed to be. If I was in the meeting, I was not surfing that I would really like. If I'm surfing, I'm not playing with my kids. If I'm playing with my kids, I'm not chatting with a friend. If I'm chatting with a friend, I'm not giving the class. And so when you decide to do something, you leave lots of things out. So in this matter of managing time, maybe we have a lot to learn with the animals. For example, do you know how a lion spends a typical day? How is the 24 hours typical day of a lion? It's this. 80% of this time sleeping, 7% socializing, grooming, blah, blah, blah. And an elephant, do you know how an elephant spends his 24 hours a day, typical day? This 82% of the day of an elephant is spending eating, 10% sleeping, and 8% trying to not to forget. So that's why is that so big. Anyway, the thing is, and what about a panda? You know, a panda spends his typical 24-hour day at this, being adorable. And this is the best metaphor for brands nowadays, because brands, all of the brands wants to look like this coochie friendly thing, like pandas, but in the end, they want your wallet, they want your money, they want you to pick them before the other brands. So that's exactly with the panda. It's a wild bear. If he finds you in the forest, probably he will kill you. But okay, brands are not that bad. So as you see, the question in the beginning wasn't that pointless, right? So don't you have nothing more interesting to do? Okay, we know this, so what's the big deal? The big deal is we need to create ideas and stories in which people want to spend this time. Use, but spend. Why? Because the better the idea, the longer people will devote it. So this is where storytelling enters. And storytelling, we can define it as the heart of using language, visualization, and physical movement and gesture to reveal the elements and images of a story to a specific audience. So, how to define the power of a brand story? How do we know if the story that we have to tell to our audience, to our consumers, to our potential targets are strong enough? Well, I would say that we have this triangle with three major things: authentic, emotional and consistent. Of course, authentic. Never lie to the consumers. Of course, it could take a week or a year or 10 years, but the truth always comes up. So if a brand lies, it's exactly the same with people. It's very bad for their reputation. Emotional, because we are humans, as we see it in the end of this presentation. And of course, consistent. If you have a story that you can use along many years, or a character or an idea that's better, than you need to reinvent your stories every 2 weeks or every year. That's definitely. And again, I think to answer the question, how to define the power of a brand story, we need to ask 5 questions. For each of these 5 questions that I have, I've got an example. And in the end, you could ask yourselves if the example answer that question. The first one is this: we should ask ourselves when we have this story, does my story have human emotion? Of course, we are not rocks, we are not bricks, we are people with feelings and with emotions. So the story that I have as human emotion, see this example and tell me.
To my mother, I leave a tidy room and an empty table. Hand to hand, we spread. To my grandfather, I leave a T-1 fan. To my father, one less chance of becoming a grandpa. To my brother, I leave a huge hug for his graduation day. To my sister, I leave a diary with some blank pages. To my friends, I leave one less friend. To my girlfriend, I leave an apology. And to you, I leave a piece of advice. Use a condom.
So what do you think? Do you think this story has human emotion? I think so. We see the life of this kid since he was a little baby, so well, till he dies, as we understand. The second question is, does my story reveals a brand truth? And see it for yourself.
2010, the Brazilian football team Corinthians turned 100 years old. To pay homage to its more than 30 million fans, Nike has founded a country. República Popular do Corinthians was born bigger than 150 other countries in the world. To avoid any doubts that República Popular do Corinthians is really a country, we developed everything that a nation needs to be recognized as such. Legislation. On the date of the centenary, the Magna Carta of República Popular do Corinthians was printed in the main newspapers. Documents. In República Popular do Corinthians, people have the right to have their own identity card. More than 1 million were issued in the first month. Birth certificate. Hundreds of thousands were issued online. Both documents could also be retrieved at the Corinthian stores. Just like the passport, the most important document of the nation, used to mark all the matches that the Corinthians fan attended. Even an amnesty letter was made to accept fans of other teams in our nation. We made one of the biggest flags of a country in the world, 5,400 square meters, hoisted by 10,000 Corinthians fans at every match. It even made the cover of a newspaper. Our embassy is itinerant. It travels around the state, presenting and selling the products of the team and the Republic. It was founded at the centenary party and has been visited by thousands of Corinthians fans. The currency, named Corinthios, is used as for real at the club stores as discount vouchers. The club's heroes were given special attention in this story. Their images were featured on shop windows, posters, locker rooms, scoreboards during matches, and even the club's new training center. The players spontaneously adopted the Republic. The fans especially adopted the Republic. And if that wasn't enough, we appointed a president.
Aqui é a faixa do primeiro presidente da República Popular do Corinthians.
The news spread all over the media.
E o presidente Lula, corintiano declarado como presidente
ao presidente da República, Luiz Inácio Lula.
The fact is that República Popular do Corinthians generated a lot of free media coverage.
Olha o passaporte do Corinthians.
uma certidão de nascimento.
Centro de treinamento do Corinthians.
República Popular do Corinthians.
República do Corinthians.
Popular do Corinthians.
A República Popular do Corinthians. No Centro de Treinamento do Corinthians.
Pega pra ele o passaporte do Corinthians.
Passaporte do Corinthians.
Passaporte corintiano. Essa certidão de nascimento é verdadeira, tá bom? É verdadeira.
And a gigantic mailing list of fans for Nike. A campaign that the club intends to adopt as a marketing platform forever. It was so successful that Nike wants to export the idea to other clubs from abroad.
Saio daqui mais comprometido com o Corinthians, com passaporte corintiano. Minha mulher com passaporte corintiano. Certamente meus filhos todos terão passaporte corintiano, porque eu não quero ninguém vivendo na clandestinidade na nação corintiana.
You know, there are just 4 more football teams in the world that can make this: Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Benfica Lisbon. Well, the third question is, does my story has a great insight? This is very, very powerful and very, very important for every campaign, every advertising. Find this little insight that everybody sees and no one ever put it on advertising. For example, this São Paulo, it's not the capital, but a big city in Brazil with a chaotic traffic every day. So they found this and they did this.
Milhões de pessoas estão no carro escutando o rádio, todas sérias, sonolentas, até que uma inspiração muda tudo. Convidamos você a sorrir para o motorista do carro ao lado. Se ele estiver ouvindo isso, ele vai sorrir de volta.
Agora é só estender esse momento para a sua vida. Inspiração muda tudo e a vida fica assim, uma Brastemp.
Okay, so the next question is, does my story makes people relate to it? Of course, we can have a story with human emotion. We can have a story that reveals my brand truth. We can have a story that has a great insight. But my story makes people relate to it. For example, see this.
I've been here so lonely. I've been hiking all this way. Winds will blow what's left of you and I. Lonely souls will keep alive. All this magic that we used to have.
And of course, that makes people relate to it. And the last question is, does my story steers people? This is very important because in the end, advertising always works to have an output, to let people to do something. So see this great example.
The 73,000 Bar Tab, presented by Bar Aurora and Boteco Ferraz. 2 years ago, Brazil instated a zero-tolerance policy on drunk driving. Even so, 35,000 people died in car accidents last year. So, if jail and fines won't catch people's attention, what will? What if we added the real costs of drunk driving to customers' bar tabs? Reminded our customers that driving home that night could have been very expensive. They got pissed, then they got the message. For an action that cost us nothing, we were able to make people think.
This is the 5 questions that we need to ask to see the power of and the strength of our brand story. But to finish, I'd like to finish talking about this. This is very, very important in every story. The human involvement. 3 more final examples. You all know this guy, right? Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin. Do you know what he did when he launched the Virgin Cola in the United States? He did this. He rented a tank from the Second World War, and he went down the 5th Avenue, going over Coca-Cola cans and challenging the CEO of Coca-Cola for an arm wrestle and saying, "Hey, you CEO of Coca-Cola, do you want to do an arm wrestle with me?" The one who loses left the marking. Of course, the CEO of Coca-Cola didn't answer, but this is just works because it's Richard Branson. We don't see a president of a national bank doing a thing like this. Richard Branson can do this, so it's because it's him who can do this. And this lady, do you know this lady? You all know this, Cecilia Jimenez. This lady is the lady who painted the Krista of Borgia. You all remember for sure. He wants to make art, and she did this, which is very awful, and it was in a minute worldwide known. And to finish this human involvement, you all know this guy, Felix Baumgartner, the guy who jumped from the stratosphere, and you are wondering why did he do this? Do you think it's because Red Bull pay him? No. Do you think it's because he wants to break a world record? No. Because he's crazy? Well, probably no. I'm going to show you why he did it. Anyway, he just went there to the stratosphere to look to the Earth. This is what happened. You are now going to see firsthand.
Ramos al cuarto penalti para empatar. Sempre Ñalgut que el tire fora de la portería, Sempre Ñalgut. La carrera de Sergio Ramos. No! No! Hostia, no! Medical systems are green.
Vamos, que la liga parda, son.
This is what happened anyway. So there's nothing more memorable than a good story. And this is really to finish. 30 more seconds. This is a a movie called Lost Generation that I would like to share with you because it has two fundamental interests in here. The first, it's an advice, if you allow me to give you an advice for your lives. And the second one, and more important, is an example that shows that every story, even the story of your lives, if it's told otherwise, can gain a total, completely different meaning. It's called Lost Generation.
I am part of a lost generation and I refuse to believe that I can change the world. I realize this may be a shock, but happiness comes from within is a lie, and money will make me happy. So in 30 years, I will tell my children they are not the most important thing in my life. My employer will know that I have my priorities straight because work is more important than family. I tell you this, once upon a time, families stayed together. But this will not be true in my era. This is a quick fix society. Experts tell me 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. I do not concede that I will live in a country of my own making. In the future, environmental destruction will be the norm. No longer can it be said that my peers and I care about this earth. It will be evident that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It is foolish to presume that there is hope. And all of this will come true unless we choose to reverse it. There is hope. It is foolish to presume that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It will be evident that my peers and I care about this earth. No longer can it be said that environmental destruction will be the norm. In the future, I will live in a country of my own making. I do not concede that 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. Experts tell me this is a quick fix society, but this will not be true in my era. Families stayed together once upon a time. I tell you this, family is more important than work. I have my priorities straight because my employer will know that they are not the most important thing in my life. So in 30 years, I will tell my children, money will make me happy is a lie, and true happiness comes from within. I realize this may be a shock, but I can change the world, and I refuse to believe that I am part of a lost generation.
So, that's it. Thank you all. I'm seeing a few questions here about branded entertainment and how, what is one of the key elements to make branded entertainment communicate, for example, brand values? Well, in my opinion, there are two major things that should be very important in every story, in every brand storytelling, which is authenticity and relevance. I mean, you cannot lie to the consumers if your story becomes from one thing that it's really true from your origin or from the date or how your brand was created and how, where, by who, whatever. It's very important because probably you have something unique to tell to your consumers or to your audience, to your target. And the second thing, the story should be relevant because many times stories are created in advertising agents, in creative departments, and they are closed in a room and they are thinking for themselves. They are thinking for their friends. They are not thinking in the people which the story is dedicated to. So the story has to be relevant for the people who is the target of that. So these are the most important things, I think, and that helps to build brand values and, of course, strong brands. One last question: how much control can you realistically have when it comes to your brand when it will be perceived by the consumer? Well, that's a good question. In fact, and nowadays, since the social media and the social networks are, as you know, everybody has an opinion on everything. Everybody talks about everything, including brands and including products and services. You don't have a warranty that your story will be perceived like you want to. But this is common sense. There are stories and there are things like well, love and anger, and there are lots of things that always that were always in the stories since the beginning of humanity. So the thing is, now the brands need to understand how to look to these human factors and find what's which of them are relevant to pass their idea and to pass their stories. And I think that's the most important. Thank you. So hope to see you next time. And for those of you, if there are something who comes in May to Lisbon for CBBC project, welcome and see you. See you.